car crashes, defective products, dangerous drugs, injuries, and abuse. Across the state of Alabama, the attorneys, proudly sponsored by the law firm of Hollis, Wright, are here to serve you. Your tough legal questions answered by our experts with the attorneys of Hollis, Wright.
Well, welcome to the attorneys, and we want to thank you for joining us. And we are going to tackle a pretty complex landscape, the troubled teen industry. That's a term often used to describe programs or facilities aimed at helping adolescents, struggling adolescents. And believe it or not, it's really big business, and we're going to break that down for you. I'm Art Franklin. Welcome to the attorneys. He, of course, is Josh Wright, managing partner at Hollis Wright, and along with us is our special guest, Tommy James. Good to have you with us.
Thank you for having me.
Tommy, we've been friends for a long period of time. First of all, thank you for being on. And tell me how you got into this area of law, because this is a unique specialty for certain.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I started handling these cases representing children, kind of our most vulnerable in society, children who can't help themselves. Oftentimes they would have disabilities, behavioral problems, mental problems. Sometimes they wouldn't have a family. And I would get calls from parents saying, this is what happened to one of my children. They were in some sort of facility, they were injured, they were raped, they were physically assaulted, various injuries that they received in these places. And they would call me, and ultimately I'd be successful in handling their case, and just word of mouth kind of got out. And some of these cases are kind of high profile, so they get media attention, as they should, because the light needs to be shown on these kind of cases. So something could be done about it, and so it kind of just started in that way.
How do you define this buzz phrase, troubled teen industry? Like, what is that? Help the viewing audience understand really what the topic is about.
It's called the troubled teen industry. I'm not sure that's the right way to say it, but that's what it's generally known as. And it's across the country. The industry includes like reform schools, wilderness therapy, boot camps, psychiatric residential facilities, therapeutic boarding homes, that oftentimes parents, believe it or not, will place their children, desperate parents, their kids having problems, will send them to these places to hopefully get them better. In Alabama, mainly what we're talking about are residential treatment facilities that DYS, Department of Youth Services, and DHR, Department of Human Resources, will place foster children in these facilities. And what's going on in these facilities, a light needs to be shown on what's happening.
And along those lines, I want to talk about their current data suggesting about 200,000 teens or adolescents are in residential programs of this nature. That's like almost the size of the city of Birmingham. That's a lot of young people.
That's the same analogy I was thinking about this morning before coming over here. It's a massive amount of children, and it's a massive for-profit industry. Some of the biggest players in this industry are United Health Services. They're a multi-billion-dollar company. The estimates are up to $23 billion of public money is being paid to these facilities to warehouse children, essentially. Based on my experience, they're not getting the help they need. They're supposed to be going into these places to hopefully get better. They're not getting better. Instead, oftentimes, they're being abused and neglected. These places are breeding grounds for abuse and neglect because it's a for-profit business. Yeah. And we have testimony of some of the higher-ups in some of these businesses saying, the lower the cost, the more money we make. So they cut in corners with hiring, and they hire unqualified staff. They work them to death. It's a horrible atmosphere. I mean, when we get into the stories later, I mean, they're houses of horrors.
Yeah, and I just doing some general research, there are 10,000 of these facilities across the country. I mean, that's a lot.
Yeah, I mean, because it encompasses so many different things. The wilderness schools. Yeah. I mean, Alabama has, just to give the viewers some names of them, it's Pathways, it's Sequel, it's Hillcrest here in Birmingham, it's Alabama Clinical Schools here in Birmingham, the Bridge down in Mobile, Alta Point. The Sequel has places all across the state, Huntsville, Montgomery, They're in Tuscaloosa. I mean, they're everywhere in Alabama. So, and we're talking hundreds and hundreds of kids in Alabama in these places at one time. So it's a massive amount.
Can I attach this number that I saw in some of the preparation for this? $23 billion estimated in this industry.
Public money.
Public money.
Public money.
Where is that money going?
That's going into the pockets of these corporations. It's big business. It's profit, profit, profit. While they're supposed to be helping children, instead of helping these children, they're cutting corners, making massive amounts of money. And that's what we're trying to do in this litigation against these companies, these big companies, is change the system. We'll get into the legislative fix. It's a national problem.
Yeah.
There's legislative fixes. Some states have done a better job at regulating this industry. Oregon's been really aggressive about it. Alabama, believe it or not, has pretty good regulations to oversee these facilities, but there's no oversight. DHR will receive complaints of abuse, neglect, deplorable living conditions in these places, and they'll slap a new paint job on there, and the problems persist.
What is the is the problem based on cutting corners because these businesses are trying to increase their profit margins per child? I mean, where do you think it comes from?
Because nationwide, in Alabama, we're paying DHR, DYS. Ultimately, our tax dollars are going to pay for these children to stay there per day, and it's over $300 per day, up to $400 a day, and that's big money. It adds up per child per day. It's cutting corners. I mean, they use these children at these places as their labor. They won't hire cleaning staff. They'll make them clean. We're not talking about just chores. We're talking about massive cleaning of these facilities, landscape. They make these choices, essentially forced labor.
Yeah. And, it seems to me that a parent who is, in a position to put a child in one of these facilities is really trusting that facility is going to be able to do, wonders for their child, and they just need to be careful and be vigilant about that.
They do, because it's interesting. These companies, these corporations will market towards parents who are desperate, and they will also, they're what called educational consultants, and they're kind of the middleman between parents and these facilities, and sometimes the educational consultants will guide children to certain programs where they'll get a kickback, essentially. So they're marketing to desperate people, and some of these parents need help, and they're desperate to get it. And when the child gets there, oftentimes there's little to no communication.
Yeah, where they're not even able to communicate with their parents.
And if there is a conversation, there's someone else in the room that works for this facility.
I know we're getting ready to go to break, Art. When we come back, I want to talk about a couple topics, one of which is whether the Medical Liability Act applies to some of these facilities, and then just kind of unwrapping some of the circumstances and cases that Tommy handles.
Yes, and if I can also add to that, how widespread is this? I mean, you're talking about big figures and a lot of numbers. Just want to know how widespread the problem is with the troubled teen industry. So we're talking with Tommy James about that, and you're watching the attorneys, of course. We have attorneys standing by right now who will take your call, a free call, anonymous call. If you call 1-844-LAW-TALK, that's 1-844-529-8255, someone from Hollis Wright will answer that call and get to your question. We're going to take a break, and we'll be back to talk about the troubled teen industry with Tommy James right here on The Attorneys. Stay with us.
I'm Josh Wright with the law firm of Hollis Wright, a personal injury law firm, and thank you for watching The Attorneys. We hope you, a friend, or a loved one never needs legal counsel for a case. But if you do, the goal of the show is simple: to provide answers and legal counsel when you need it the most. Your call to the show is free and off air. So if you have questions specific to the show or related to other accident or injury topics, call, email, or text us. You can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube, or go to hollis-wright.com and click on the Contact Us button. We know your time is valuable, so thank you for spending it with us and watching. The Attorneys.
The Attorneys, proudly sponsored by the law firm of Hollis, Wright, are here to serve you.
When we started the show in 2011, my goal was to do what our firm does best. Help people answer questions related to real-world legal issues they have in their lives in a way that's not intimidating to talk with a lawyer. If the issue is important to you, it's equally important to us, and we're ready to talk with you at no cost.
Yeah, oftentimes people are confronting various legal issues in their lives that really run the gamut of a lot of different legal practice areas such as bankruptcy, criminal law, civil law such as personal injury, divorces, domestic relations. And to be able to have a show once a week that covers those practice areas and answers people's questions in those areas, that's really the main objective of the show.
We use the resources of the many lawyers at our law firm to create a plan that has a lasting impact for each person that calls or texts. And we also give back to the community at the same time. We are here to serve you, the viewer, each week on The Attorneys. At Hollis Wright, we pride ourselves on having a bedside manner that's second to none. That means we listen more than we speak, and we return calls to current and potential clients. Our attorneys are standing by right now. At Hollis Wright, your result matters.
Welcome back to The Attorneys. We're just getting started on a very heavy, complex, and emotional issue, the issue of troubled teen industry. Tommy James is here to break that down for us. And Josh, before we were going to break, you wanted to put a pin on some things you wanted to touch on.
Well, yeah, and I think your pin was even better, which is, how widespread is this? I mean, I know that not every facility in Alabama is doing it the wrong way. I mean, some are doing it the right way, and some kids have a successful pathway through these facilities. But for those doing it the wrong way, we got guys like Tommy to handle it. How widespread is this issue? I mean, is it happening consistently at these facilities?
Oh, yeah, and I call it a national nightmare because it's happening everywhere, and so much so that Paris Hilton is out there advocating for it. And there was a bill introduced, the Senate bill introduced, the SICA, Stop Institutional Child Abuse Act, was introduced in the Senate earlier this year. It's bipartisan support. Senator Tuberville actually is one of the sponsors of that bill. That bill will bring greater transparency to it, reporting. It's kind of like to determine best practices as to how this and why it shouldn't happen across the country, because the abuse is so widespread. When when Congress gets involved, I mean, obviously it's a problem across the country, and it is. We've gotten calls from Colorado, Oregon, Iowa. I mean, we've gotten calls. A little Alabama law firm like mine gets calls from all across the country about these cases now. So yeah, it's definitely widespread.
And Art, the thing about it is a lot of times these industries will start, and I've seen this over 25, 30 years of practice of law, and there'll be no regulations to start with, and then there'll be a need for regulations, and then there's legislation that comes in, then there's a best practices that comes in, and Tommy's talking just about that, how this process works, that okay, this was completely unregulated, it's completely out of control, now we need to regulate it, we're going to legislate it, we're going to create best practices, and then all of a sudden things are a lot more efficient. It just consistently happens.
Well, you tell your audience what brings the most rapid change, and that's litigation in these types of situations.
That's right.
And that's one of the reasons we want to bring as many cases as we can, viable cases as we can, to bring the change that legislative action can take forever. Washington's slow, Alabama legislature, no offense, can be kind of slow. Litigation will make them change.
So it's really advocacy from a standpoint, from a legal side, when you put the pressure on them that way, and with lawsuits to really get them to change. What kind of changes are you seeing because of the legal pressures that you put on them?
I believe we've seen changes in some of these places because Sequel was one of the biggest players in Alabama, and I've got multiple cases against Sequel. And since the lawsuits have started, they've kind of divested out of the space, and new companies come in. We don't know if that's because of us or not. And I mean, it's hard to tell, actually. We're hoping on the inside they're making change that we're not aware of, because sadly we're still seeing the abuse. We're still getting calls daily about abuse in these facilities. So we hope we're bringing the change, but the more cases we file, the more press and attention like this that you guys can give us to shine a light on what's going on in these places, because it's just kind of a dark secret right now.
And I know there are some well-known, prominent people across the country that are getting involved in this, one of which that you're kind of speaking with out in, I guess, at Las Vegas coming up. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, Paris Hilton is one of the strongest advocates across the country due to her celebrity and due to, I mean, the Hiltons, they're one of the wealthiest families in the country, and Paris was having behavioral problems as a child, and her parents placed her in several of these facilities in Utah, Provo Canyon being the worst one that she's still trying to shut down. She was sexually abused in one of these facilities. So she has been severely traumatized by it, and she has been a well-spoken, powerful advocate for it across the country, going to D.C., going to state houses in Utah and Oregon, and she's helped change laws in 7 states. Powerful. So using her celebrity to get this done, and I'm honored to be able to speak after she does, because she's going to tell her story, and then I get to kind of update the litigation and tell these lawyers from across the country, you need to go out and be handling these kind of cases so we can make a change. This isn't just about, a normal mass tort case when you got a device or a product or something like that. These are cases that I think people and lawyers will be proud to represent their clients on to make change.
In Alabama, do some of these cases fall into the Medical Liability Act?
Interestingly enough, you would ask that. We are litigating that right now before the Alabama Supreme Court on a few of these cases. We've won in the Alabama Supreme Court where the defense argued it was a med-mal case, and we've got one right now where they're arguing it's med-mal that's being briefed before the Supreme Court. We don't think there's any way these are med-mal cases. Don't want to get too much into the legal weeds, but how can someone being assaulted or sexually assaulted, as you know, you got to have a medical injury for it to come under the Alabama Liability Act, given during the course of medical care or therapeutic treatment. That's not what's happening. They may be in there to hopefully get better when they don't have doctors in these facilities. They don't have nurses.
Right.
So, and somebody getting kicked in the jaw, that's not providing medical treatment.
The reason that matters and why I ask that is the Medical Liability Act has a tremendous number of hurdles that one has to jump through that is a victim in litigation in order to present your claim and be successful with your claim. So if it falls under the Medical Liability Act, it makes the litigation much more complicated than it would have been otherwise, where it may just be general negligence, premises claims, etc. And so it's kind of an interesting issue. I figured that was being litigated at least at some level of appeals here in Alabama.
Yeah, because the Medical Liability Act restricts our ability to show other instances of bad conduct at a certain facility. And where I've got a client who was sexually assaulted at a facility, when we know of many other sexual assaults there, if it's deemed a medical malpractice case, I can't get those other assaults into evidence. And we want to be able to show the jury what's happening inside these walls in these places.
And you touched on a lot of things that really caught my attention, because this is really raising awareness for me as an individual. But we talked about the assaults. But when you said there are no doctors, no nurses in these facilities, have you gotten calls about safety issues at these facilities?
Oh gosh, yes. There is a culture of violence oftentimes in these facilities. The children there do not feel safe. It's the most interesting thing. Kids will say to me, have you ever heard, Mr. James, you ever heard of putting snacks on your head? And I'm like, no, what is that, putting snacks on your head? He said, employees will say, we're going to put a snack on your head, basically a bounty. If they don't like a child in one of these facilities, they'll place a snack on his head, and that's a bounty for other kids to attack this child. They'll get extra snacks and extra privileges. They literally call it putting snacks on your head. And I've heard this in multiple facilities. It's kind of, some of these places resemble prisons, and they're not prisons. These are supposed to be therapeutic places where children are supposed to be getting better. I mean, some of the kids in these places, got caught smoking weed or stuff like that nowadays is minor, and they're put in one of these places that's hell.
When we come back, I want to talk a little bit about whether or not these kids are getting an education while they're here too. That's something that Tommy can unwrap for us.
More eye-opening information that we're getting from Tommy James on this issue of the troubled teen industry, a topic that we're tackling here on The Attorneys this week, and want to let you know that you can get information from us by calling 1-844-LAW-TALK, and you can reach an attorney at Hollis Wright. That call is free. That call is confidential. No one has to know what that call is about. It's between you and the attorney that you talk with. Stay with us. Tough issue, but we're unwrapping it right here on The Attorneys.
Thank you for watching The Attorneys each Sunday night, where we come to your living room to provide free legal advice in a confidential, off-air setting. Unfortunately, with the number of calls, texts, and emails that come in during the show, we can't always get to everything. But know this, Hollis Wright is open all week long. You call us at 844-LAW-TALK and we're going to answer your question for free. Thank you for watching The Attorneys, and we look forward to seeing you and talking to you soon. Did you know we have nearly 100 five-star reviews on Google? That's because our clients like the work we do. If you've been injured in an accident, we are here to help. Give us a call for a free consultation. At Hollis Wright, your result matters.
Welcome back to The Attorneys. Remember, you can scan that QR code on your television right now. It'll take you right to Hollis Wright. You can ask a question there, reach one of the attorneys. Also, click on the social media pages for Hollis Wright. That's a good place for you to get that information. We're talking about the troubled teen industry, along with Tommy James, our special guest here, and of course, Josh Wright, our managing partner at Hollis Wright. Big topic.
You know, Tommy, we've talked about a lot of stuff. Obviously, a lot of these teens that are going through these facilities should actively be in school otherwise. What role does education play in these facilities, if anything?
Well, over the years, handling these cases, talking to parents and children and guardians, we've always asked the question, well, are you receiving any education? And they're not really, and then they'll give us examples. There'll be multiple children, different grade levels, and they'll be doing an activity like a coloring book for 6th graders and 7th graders and 9th graders, and all in one. Or they'll be doing 7th grade coursework for even seniors in the room. So they're not receiving adequate education. And the DOJ 2 years ago started an investigation into it in Alabama, and their findings were released last October, and they found that children in these facilities are disabled under the law because they have mental behavioral issues, oftentimes trauma, and the results of what's going on with trauma can be classified as a disability. So these children are being discriminated against under the American Disabilities Act, and they're not receiving the equal or adequate education as their non-disabled peers are. Now, the interesting thing they found about it was that the vast majority of kids in these facilities, vast, not just majority, vast majority, could be attending public school outside of these facilities. These facilities will have like an on-site school with no extracurricular activities, no athletics, no potential to interact with their non-disabled peers, when they should be going to private school right down the street. They don't have that opportunity. Like I said, they're not getting grade level education. They don't have labs, so they're being deprived of an education. They can't even get, some of them can't even get a GED. And oftentimes you'll have a successful student go into one of these facilities, and if they're there for months and months, they get so far behind they have to go backwards in school instead of going forwards. The record keeping so shoddy in these places, sometimes the schools don't know where to place them when they get out, so it's a problem.
You know, and I think someone watching this show may think, well, you know, a lot of these teens, just hear me out, a lot of these teens brought this on by themselves. Their parents were forced to put them in. That's not necessarily the people that are coming in here. I mean, some of these people may have been abused, I mean, may have PTSD, psychological issues, other disabilities. I mean, a lot of these kids are super innocent coming into these facilities.
That is a great point. These, a lot of times, are foster children who grew up in broken homes. Parents will be drugged or have other issues and not be able to take care of them. And sometimes other family members can't take care of them, so they end up in one of these facilities, because there's a lack of foster parents in Alabama, so they'll put him in one of these places where are breeding grounds for abuse and neglect, and they don't receive proper education. I didn't even get into this. ADAP, the Alabama's Disability Advocacy Program, which is a watchdog group here in Alabama for disabled people, they've inspected these facilities, and they're just horrible pictures of just deplorable living conditions with rodents, feces and blood on the walls and on the windows. I have clients who in nicer places have scorpion bites and bed bug bites. The conditions are horrible.
Matt, just listening to you, I'm just horrified by what's happening in these facilities. And these are state facilities all across the state,
Exactly.
Many of them privately owned, right? And
For-profit. These are in Alabama, these are primarily are all for-profit facilities. But if I may say something about the education cases one more time, we filed 6 cases under the Americans with Disabilities Action Claim last week or the week before in Montgomery in the Middle District. We believe every child who has ever been in one of these facilities for 3 or 4 months or longer has a case similar to the ones we filed for not receiving a proper and adequate education at one of these facilities. If they're 21 or younger, have been in one of these facilities for 3 or 4 months, with placed by DHR, they've got a viable claim. And those cases we filed are against the Department of Human Resources and the State Board of Education.
Are they class-based cases or they individual?
They're individual cases.
Okay, individual cases. But your point is that anyone who did not have an education provided to them during that time probably has the same viable claim.
Right. They need to call you, me, or somebody to explore their options.
Yeah,
is there any success story? Is there any glimmer of hope? Because what I'm hearing is so much destruction and despair. We want to hear something that helps, and I guess that's the legal representation.
Well, I have a client who was horribly abused by both staff and other residents, and I didn't get into that because I know we're in that time, but oftentimes in these cases it's staff on my client abuse. Sometimes there's little to no supervision, so it's child-on-child abuse, and they sometimes even encourage the kids to fight. So that's going on across the state. I may have lost you on your last point.
Just so a glimmer of hope, and that's a
point.
legal representation?
Well, I think that's right.
And I mean, some of these young kids, I was saying, that they want to be advocates. Like one of my clients, and he's gotten hurt more than, and he's a young guy, he's 11 years old. He wants to go down to Montgomery and advocate for kids like him and tell people what's going on in these facilities.
Sometimes the light is shined through litigation.
That's right.
Thank you.
Why you
Good
do
job.
what you do.
And I enjoyed it.
Yep.
Thank you. Good to have you on, and good to have you guys joining us here on The Attorneys, and reminding you once again to call 1-844-LAW-TALK to reach an attorney at Hollis, Wright, and make sure you join us again next week as we bring you another show. Great to have you with us. So.
Thanks for watching The Attorneys, sponsored by Hollis, Wright.